Hello, human geographers. We are back at it again this evening. Tonight, we're going to continue our conversation about urban sustainability by examining some of the challenges that must be addressed to ensure that cities continue to exist well into the future. And there are many challenges that come from dense urban populations, including suburban sprawl, the need to provide clean water and air to city residents, climate change, higher energy use, struggling sanitation systems, and the fact that cities alter natural landscapes. So let's start with suburban sprawl. There is a direct correlation between the physical size of a city and its environmental impact. The more extensive the sprawl, the more significant the environmental damage. As cities grow horizontally, natural areas, agricultural lands, and wildlife habitats are destroyed. Sprawl also encourages automobile use while discouraging healthy lifestyle habits like walking and biking. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau reported that the longest commute times exist in the newest urban areas, which are typically the ones that are on the outermost edge of the metropolitan area. This in turn leads to an increased use of energy. Low-density communities consume significantly more energy per capita than high-density neighborhoods. As a result, environmental issues are rising in urban areas, such as worsening air pollution from the burning of non-renewable fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. In fact, the UN estimated that in 2016, cities accounted for between 60 and 80% of the world's energy consumption. And unsurprisingly, up to 75% of greenhouse gas emissions come from urban areas as well. Cities also struggle with providing adequate sanitation services for their citizens. Aging infrastructure in core countries and non-existent sanitation services in the slums of developing countries present different problems, but problems nonetheless. The World Bank estimates that only about 40% of urban residents in developing countries are connected to piped sewer systems. And the fact that 90% of sewage systems in the developing world discharge their waste untreated into rivers, lakes, or the sea presents a situation where people can and do die from preventable causes. And that doesn't address the collection of garbage and solid waste, much of which ends up dumped in canals, rivers, and gullies. So let's build on that by looking at the environmental challenges that are presented by rising urbanization. As cities continue to sprawl outward, providing enough energy, food, and water to large densities of people stress the natural environment. Scholars call the spatial extent of an urban area's impact on the environment the urban footprint. So sprawl removes vegetation, flattens the ground, diverts water, and even changes the way that air flows around buildings that now take up what used to be open space. And urban vegetation can have huge impacts on the environment. By removing vegetation, less pollution in the form of CO2 is converted to oxygen. And there may be fewer habitats for animals, less surface and groundwater that is absorbed, and wind speeds and temperatures may be more extreme without any natural cover to mitigate them. In fact, city temperatures are nearly 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the countryside during the summer, and can be more than 10 degrees warmer during the winter. This is known as the urban heat island effect. This comes from the heating systems of buildings and their building materials, but also from automobiles, industry, and the high concentrations of people. In addition, factories, businesses, power plants, and automobiles are a major source of air pollution. And for many of the poorest cities without proper waste disposal systems, the air quality is worsened by dried fecal matter. Recently, numerous megacities had dangerous levels of at least one major pollutant in their air. And air quality can cause premature death and reduced cognitive abilities in children, which can have long-term health and economic impacts for a city. For example, Shanghai, China has the highest percentage of new asthma cases in children under 18. And water quality also remains a major issue. Residential areas are the largest consumers of water in cities, and this is even greater in middle and high-income neighborhoods, leading to increased concerns about municipal water usage. And many other areas do not even have access to safe and clean drinking water. Especially in periphery or semi-periphery countries, millions of urban dwellers lack this necessity. From the same World Bank study we referenced earlier, only 65% of urban residents in developing countries have access to clean water. And it's often domestic sewage that's the problem with the urban water supply. But industrial and agricultural waste can also contaminate the water. And it isn't just developing countries that suffer from the lack of safe drinking water. Poor countries with aging infrastructure struggle to maintain water quality. As we mentioned in an earlier lecture, Flint, Michigan had unacceptable levels of lead in their water, as did Newark, New Jersey. But they are not the only areas that struggle with access to clean drinking water in the United States. Finally, urban areas are both contributors to and victims of climate change. Much of the energy consumption and CO2 emissions come from cities, and many megacities or world cities could be heavily impacted by climate change. London, Mumbai, Cairo, Rio de Janeiro, and New York City all reside in low-lying areas on the coast that could be vulnerable should sea levels continue to rise. Other cities like Lima and Tehran could face more frequent and intense heat waves. But cities like Vancouver, Copenhagen, and Boston, among others, are taking the lead on combating climate change. Some cities have attempted to restrict the amount of pollutants emitted by urban industries, while others have shifted to low carbon and renewable sources of energy, and still others have planted trees to reduce carbon dioxide. Some cities have even experimented with sustainable architecture by building green roofs or green walls, which do not retain as much heat, absorb carbon dioxide, and also help to absorb water, reducing the rapid runoff of rainwater. So now, let's look at a few more specific ideas to try and promote the creation of new, more sustainable urban spaces. One such idea is the remediation or cleanup and redevelopment of brownfields. A brownfield is a former industrial or commercial site that is underused, vacant, or abandoned, where there is the potential for environmental contamination. There are hundreds of thousands of brownfields in the United States. The first thing that must happen is remediation, which is to remove or seal off any contaminants so that the sites may be used without any health concerns. Once a vacant factory has been remediated, it can be redeveloped into something else, like apartments or restaurants or parks. Brownfield redevelopment can promote growth within a neighborhood and reduce the number of zones of abandonment within a city. So let's look at a few examples. In Pittsburgh, as the steel industry declined, many brownfields were left throughout the city. The city has since worked to convert them into impressive commercial, residential, and mixed-use projects. In London, King's Cross Station is one of Europe's largest brownfield remediation sites. It's being redeveloped into a mixed-use space with both high-end and affordable housing an educational campus, parks, and offices. In general, remediation of brownfields removes contaminants and harmful substances, leads to increased property values, promotes community pride and vitality, helps to reduce urban sprawl, and promotes economic development by improving blighted properties. And to finish up tonight, let's look at a few more specific responses to challenges to urban sustainability. Coalitions of governments may work together as part of regional planning commissions to establish urban growth boundaries and enact laws that protect farmlands from sprawl. Regional planning is planning that is conducted at the regional scale that seeks to coordinate the development of housing, transportation, urban infrastructure, and economic activities. Issues may transcend any single unit of space beyond an individual neighborhood, city, or even county. This allows different layers of government to coordinate a variety of services while also sharing the costs of planning, building, and maintaining services. So, for example, the Southern Nevada Regional Planning Commission coordinates the efforts for Clark County, the City of Las Vegas, the City of Henderson, the City of North Las Vegas, Boulder City, and the Clark County School District. Cities expand beyond the boundaries of delimited municipalities, so multiple layers of government must work together to provide adequate services and reduce urban sprawl. Urban growth boundaries are another way to try and limit sprawl. These attempt to promote growth in areas that are already urbanized, rather than encroaching on agricultural or open spaces. Growth boundaries also promote higher population density. Portland, Oregon has established an urban growth boundary that prioritizes infilling to promote efficient and sustainable land use. But even still, cities are continuing to sprawl and encroach on rural areas. As this happens, suburban or exurban residents often complain about the dust and odors, the noise that's associated with agricultural activities. So farmland protection policies, commonly called right to farm laws, protect farmers from nuisance complaints. They also protect agricultural lands from being converted to non-agricultural uses. And that is where we will leave things for tonight. Have a good evening, geographers, and I'll see you back in class.